So welcome everyone to the session on data granularity being hosted by the Data Granularity Working Group. And this is our first plenary where we are officially up and running as a working group. This was initially a task force that came out of the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group. And now we're a working group working on a set of deliverables. And this is an opportunity for us to not only share information with you, but also really hear from you and what are your needs to help inform what you're doing. So just a reminder of protocols for using the system. Please turn your sound and video off when you're not speaking. A reminder, as people just said, that you consented to being recorded. There's a shared notes document, which we've put the the URL for that in the chat. Please add yourself to the top of it. And if you'd like an invitation to the working group, we'll remind you as to how you can do that. And we also have a column by which you can enter your interest in data granularity, whether it be something that you have a particular field of interest in terms of a particular aspect, or someone like me who put, I'm interested in various things having to do with data granularity. So what we'll be doing in this session, our agenda is we're going to give you just an overview of the group, what we have been doing, what we plan on doing. Then one of the things that we're doing is a survey related to data granularity. And one of our co-chairs, Brigitte, is going to do a little trial of that survey. We're going to have a lot of audience participation in this session. Then I and my fellow members of a use case subgroup that we have are going to lead an activity for us to gather information on your use cases. Then Raina will present the work that her subgroup is doing on looking at constraints related to data granularity. Then we'll revisit the survey and wrap up and talk to you about how to be involved. So speaking of co-chairs, so the co-chairs of this working group are myself, Katie McNeil, Raina Jenkins, and Brigitte Matiak. And we're all really excited to be working together and working with you because data granularity touches so many interesting and complex issues within the data fields and within various different RDA groups. And so it's a great opportunity for us to come and discuss together. And now I'm going to hand it over to Brigitte, who will be talking about a little more detail about the mission of our group.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Okay, so as mentioned before, our working group evolved out of data discovery, and one of our particular interests is to explore key questions and collect and share valuable information on how to best support data granularity. And to help data professionals to determine the best levels of granularity for example, discovery, access, interoperability, and citability. So what we've noticed within the group is that there are certain problems that occur with data granularity. You will hear a lot more about that in the use cases section of this plenary. And what we're trying to find out is really to get more of an information of what the issues are and really look at that from different directions. But we're not doing that completely isolated. We build upon and complement existing and ongoing work at RDA. One way of doing that is because some of our members are also members in other RDA groups. But also by utilizing you or audiences to get more feedback on other RDA activities. And of course, we're also reading a lot of documents. And in the end, we will have a set of collected use cases and a guidance document to data granularity approaches. We will prioritize the use cases. We will work a little bit more on the terminology. And we will develop some methods to evaluate approaches and also give a summary of what the community has said about our suggestions on how to work with data granularity.
Great. And as already indicated, our two main deliverables as this collection of use cases and whatever guidance document we're able to emerge out of this activity with. So in the first 6 months-ish, so since we officially became a working group in August, that would take us till about early spring, where we would want to do our investigative work over the first 6 months. And for that, we've divided up into 3 subgroups. One is looking at the constraints. And in that one, we're looking at how existing schemas and registries have metadata fields and whatnot that allow for different granularity concepts, and also how different RDA outputs that have already preceded us, how they, what kind of constraints they impose on whatever we might want to put forward. The survey group you'll hear about in more detail later on, but we definitely need to do a survey out to the community to get a sense of the practices that are existing and the issues that are already known and being worked out. Use cases, this is a big activity that we have going on today, but essentially this is allowing us to get a sense about all the use cases that we want to maybe cover. Maybe we won't cover all of them in our finalized guidance, but at least try to encapsulate what is the priority use cases that we'll have to assess in some way. But then after that 6 months of investigative work, we put it all together, summarize and analyze all those findings. Maybe we need to find some additional data if we're missing, we find some little gaps, but otherwise that will allow us to draft our guidance paper. And then the final 6 months, we'll be looking to finalize that, to gather feedback from other RDA groups and stakeholders, and to actually start to look at some early adopters and maybe pilot implementations. And then of course, publishing and promoting. So onto the survey.
Yeah, thank you. So back to me. Within the survey group, we decided that we will probably be doing 2 surveys, one of them targeted at repository owners or portal owners. And we're very happy that Re3 Data, and to give a shout out to Dorothea, who's also in the audience, is collaborating with us. This is a draft of a survey that you can find under the link. We haven't really, gotten all the technical kinks out. I also posted it in the chats, and it's also in the minutes if you want to look at it. So if you're a good multitasker, you can get on it right away. You can make a click through and then maybe get some comments. Otherwise, please take your time, because we're also having a breakout session on use cases, which is also very important information that we are going to incorporate into the survey. Yeah, and we're going to be back in the survey and also maybe give you some preliminary results right after the thing that Katie is going to do with you.
So we're doing well on time. So Brigitte, shall we just take 5 minutes for people to fill this out so people can feel like they have the time to do this separate from the breakouts, because we're doing well on time.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe everybody just take a couple of minutes to look into it and to try to click through it. We try to make it as succinct as possible so that people don't have to spend a lot of their valuable working time filling it out. Yeah, so maybe we can just take a couple of minutes so everybody has the opportunity to take a look at what we've done there.
So until about 17 after, maybe.
17. Oh, wow, that's generous. Okay.
Oh, 6 minutes. I was give them an extra minute.
Takes people to fill it out because we haven't really done that yet. Okay, so I already have one response, but that was a rather quick one.
Question.
Yes, please.
So we ask for just one entity type, and then will we be given an opportunity to answer for, oh, I see, how many entities do you have? Do I get to answer questions about other entities or just one?
First you answer for one, and then you can say, oh, I have more, and then you can answer for more.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, but that's something that also occurred in the pre-test. I hope that was clearer now, but we still have to work on that a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. The third sentence right there, it says you will have the opportunity to add more entity types later. I am so sorry for, I'm trying to get through it quickly.
No problem.
So if I have a suggestion for other categories of granularity levels, should I put it under other?
Absolutely yes, or just put it into the minutes or wherever you like, so we can look at it. So I still have like a big Word document where I have all the comments already, and I will just add that to it and then work on it to make better iterations of the survey.
And I just put in the chat a placeholder in the minutes document where people can add feedback.
Okay, I'm going to do that because, yeah, I believe it needs some modification. Meeting notes, feedback on survey 2. Okay.
Yeah.
So 1 minute warning, and you're welcome to do this later and give feedback ongoing as well.
just you can always complete it later. But thank you very much for that. That's already really helpful. I have five responses now. That's awesome.
But we didn't want you to feel like you had to do, we're not expecting you to do this now while we're doing the next activity. You can just stop wherever you can, and we'll start again in a minute. Okay, then I think I'll move on. If anybody's just finishing their sentences on feedback and the notes, that's great. But otherwise, we will move on to the next activity, which is from the use cases subgroup. And I realized I neglected to name all the members of the subgroup on this slide. So I'll add that later because that's no mission. And I'm not going to attempt to verbalize that now, but several people, this has been a really active group, and we are instructing ourselves to figure out one of the key deliverables of the working group, which is a set of collected use cases. And then those use cases are then going to be used to inform the second main deliverable of the working group, which is the guidance document on granularity approaches for the use cases that are prioritized. So we have a set of about 6 or 7 people working on this really active working group that spans many different time zones and countries. So it's a really exciting active group, and people bringing commonality and interest in data granularity and really capturing real life challenges and a real diversity of challenges within our group. But clearly what we're looking to do is not just document our use cases, is to look at the overall environment, because as Brigitte said in our mission, there's a lot that we're looking to build upon that various different other RDA groups have touched on in granularity as it relates to their work. And so we're not going to be reinventing the wheel of use cases, but first of all, really looking at both documenting in a structured, centralized way, what are information on use cases about data granularity in general that are already documented in other RDA groups, and then adding to that. And adding to that will be the activity that we'll be doing today in a moment. And the bulk of our work is going to be done during this first 6-month time frame by February. So we're in the midst of it. And the first thing that we did as a group is we said, let's agree on what are the format of use cases, because what you might be thinking is, well, what do you mean by a use case? Because certainly many of us have seen use cases in various different formats, from very short and structured to long and narrative. And so we are going to be combining a compilation of 2 formats. One is called the user story format. Some of you may have seen, and you'll be seeing in the notes document, that says, as a person in a kind of role, I would like to accomplish a particular kind of task so that I can achieve a broad end goal. So we like to represent the use cases both in that structure, but also in a more narrative format. We did an experiment, we tried both, and we figured that the narrative format is especially good at surfacing ambiguities, gray areas, and problems and challenges that user story format won't necessarily do. So we're going forward. So that's the format of the use cases we'll be producing. And as I said, the first 2 parts of that are documenting the existing use cases that are already done in work that many of you on this call have done, I'm sure, and then looking to expand and prioritize them. So next slide, please. So in order to expand them, we're going to do a breakout group activity, and we're going to break into 3 groups. Our activity will be about a half an hour. We'll be within the breakout groups for 20 minutes, and then we'll be back in the main room for a 10-minute discussion. And what we'd like you all to do is we're going to have a 2-part activity, and each, thanks to the members of the working group, and this particular members, they're going to be facilitators. Bev is facilitating room 1, Guang Yuan room 2, and Maggie room 3. And everybody, all the rest of you will be randomized into the rooms, and they're going to lead an activity wherein you each have a dedicated section of the notes page. If you scroll down, there's a dedicated section for each of the breakout rooms. And they're going to be asking you first to take 5 minutes of sort of quiet thinking time and describe 1 or more tasks that you've had to complete in your work, or you've seen others have to do, where data granularity was an issue. So the facilitator will just demonstrate sort of how to do that. It's going to be in sort of a brief narrative form, and we'll ask you to contribute 1 or more of those in the document. So you'll have about 5 minutes of just quiet time to do that. And then you'll have time to have a group discussion of 15 minutes as to what have you seen come out of the group? What are themes? What are different points of view and diversity you're having in there? So you'll have that discussion for 15 minutes, and then I'll give a warning that the room will be closing. I'll close the rooms, and we'll come back for 10 minutes in the big room, and each of the facilitators will go around to each of the 3 of them. They'll give a brief summary as to what are sort of main themes or issues of diversity within their groups. And then if we have time, we'll have a broader group discussion. So before we go off to the breakout rooms, is there anything that, and if anybody has to sort of jump on and off, that's fine. So is there anything that the facilitators would like to add that I may have missed, or does anybody have any questions about what we're doing in these breakout sessions?
I was just thinking maybe I should pause the recording while we're in the breakouts and then resume it when we come back?
Oh, yes. Yeah, because the breakout rooms won't be recorded, but otherwise we'll just have half an hour of watching me. I'm going to be moderated, like overseeing all the breakout rooms. That's very logical. And again, the general prompt, which you can take in any direction that's meaningful for you, is describe a task you've had to complete where data granularity was an issue. So I'm just going to pause for one more minute to see if there are any questions before I put people in breakouts.
And I'm pausing the recording now.
Everyone, we're going to resume. Recording is in progress. We're going to resume reporting. So I'm sure that you all could have kept going and kept having conversations, but I hope that sort of gained some initial ideas and started you to think about the examples that you have and the questions and complexities that are around that. So Rain, if you would go to the next slide. So now we're going to have about 10 minutes to just share what we've learned in this session and to have some big sort of group discussion. So I'm going to go around to the 3 facilitators in alphabetical order by first name, in the group order 1, 2, and 3, and just actually each of you talk about some themes that you saw or diversity you saw, anything surprised you, anything in particular that calls out for the working group to further explore. And Bev, I will start with you.
Lovely. The thing that, I mean, there's a lot of use cases around individuals reusing data. The interesting, probably novel ones that we came up with were about the level at the higher level where data had been aggregated at repository level, or and how big is a repository, if you like, and collections within repositories. And the other was where data is aggregated, where a lot of data is used for a paper, for example. This is one I hadn't really thought of, but of course people are putting a lot of this is about how you cite data, and where all of the data is aggregated just for the purposes of citing in a paper, for example, and a reuser may have to pick that apart in order. So there's 2 reuse cases there. The one where and there's always mirror use cases. There's the user who needs to cite their data in the most efficient way possible, and the other reuser who then may need to pick it apart because they don't want the same selection.
Great, thank you. Guang Yuan, you can go next, and then Maggie will be third.
Okay, thanks to Graham, my note taker. He has done a very good job taking the notes. So basically, I'm looking at the note and to summarize. So currently, 2 themes emerged in my room. So one is from data steward perspective. Another is an issue with data citation. So for data granularity issues, we found that, okay, for data stewards, the issue lies in how to organize the collections or data sets or data files in the institutional repository. So there is a case that in the institution, they decided to have a principle of like one collection, at least 3 data sets. Yes, so this was a little bit arbitrary, but it was after some time of practice and discussion, then they eventually decide to go down this road. This is just one example, but it shows that as managers of a repository, at a certain point of time, we have to decide which granularity we have which granularity level we have to take in order to inform the design of the policy or guidelines in terms of what is a collection, what is a data set. So this is still an open question, but it's something worth discussing. Another issue is data citation. Like another example shared in my room is that researchers in the what is the field? It's astrophysics. Like they have a lot of images of suns, the planets. And the researchers, when they reuse these images, they may reuse a bit from here, a bit from there. But then when they have to cite, on what basis they can cite, because how the images were organized and assign one unique identifier may be different from how the reusers of these images use. So then data citation is an issue because in this case, you're actually reusing maybe a component of one data set from a few sources. And then it's really difficult to have accurate citation that is really about just the images you have. So basically two things pop up. One is the stewardship difficulty. Another is data citation difficulty. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And group 3.
Yes, so in group 3, we maybe from accident or coincidence, I don't know, but almost all use cases we collected had something to do with repositories or looking at data from a repository point of view. And luckily, there were many different aspects that came up. So one interesting first aspect that we discussed was thematic granularity. So if you have like one portal, or you want to have one portal or one entry point, but that may be covering many different types of data or data coming from different subdisciplines of research. So how do you deal with that? And how do you allow users to maybe mix and match pieces of data from different themes when they want to extract that and use it? Then we talked a bit about the sort of inherent conflict between identifying metadata, and that goes together with data at different levels of granularity, and how you can unambiguously identify pieces of metadata by, for instance, giving a PID to metadata sets, but what do they cover? What exactly are they connected to then? Which data set belongs to what metadata and vice versa? And then we had a very interesting case where it wasn't about the data so much, but about how to describe the characteristics of a repository in terms of which levels of granularity does it normally apply. And that was from re3data.org, so the repository of repositories. And so they want to also keep track of granularity. And that was really cool to hear about that. So everyone else, I encourage you to go into the document and check out all the very interesting cases that came up.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. This is a great sort of infusion of effort and half an hour set. And I think we won't have time, more time for any open discussion, but this is something that we'll want to continue to think about. So, and I imagine there may be ideas on your mind that you didn't have a chance to write down or flesh out. So please, we do encourage you to add to the notes afterwards. And then also as a working group right now, we asked for input, but later there'll be more opportunities for giving feedback and feedback on the use cases. We may have some dedicated sessions where the use case subgroup just has sort of an open session for anybody to attend to share their further ideas or share feedback. So please stay tuned for more opportunities to give your viewpoint, because it's really valuable to get all of this so we have a really accurate view of what's going on. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand it over to Raina, who's going to be talking about the constraints subgroup.
Great, thank you. So in the constraints subgroup, basically our intent is to look at the different existing constraints based on different registries or metadata schemas that are already, frequently used by the different domains, and also the different RDA outputs that have already been recommended, so that we're not contradicting what is already stated, or if we are, that we give adequate reason for that, and we can work to amend any kind of conflicts that might exist. So definitely we'll be looking at the different metadata fields in these schemas. How are they common and different, whether it's the semantics that they're using, like the terminology, or just the types of mechanisms that they allow for granularity structures inside of them, and any kind of issues that we find in what we observe. So we're just starting to organize ourselves in a Google Sheet. This is coming out of a kickoff meeting where we kind of explored the different ways, the different facets of data granularity in data sets. So we did an exercise with a bunch of virtual Post-its, and then we grouped them, and then that kind of inspired the way that this Google Sheet is emerging. And so we haven't yet sat down together to discuss the Google Sheet together. So that's what we're going to be doing at our next subgroup meeting. So definitely, if this interests you, we definitely would encourage more people to join our subgroup. So I'm just going to quickly just show some of that look and feel of that Google Sheet. So just bear with me as I maneuver myself here. So I'm just going to make it larger, and I hope that's large enough. But generally the idea is that I've structured it so far where there's a column that will say, okay, what schema or registry are we talking about? And if there's a reference to the details of that schema. And then we're looking at, we've been talking about these different dimensions of ways that you can maybe describe your boundaries of your data set. So we're kind of looking to see what kind of fields or structures that these schemas have to allow for that. So for instance, there's the temporal dimension. So in time, and maybe what resolution in time, or whether it's, it might be periodic, or it might be not so cleanly delineated in the time series. So how can we represent that information in the schema? What kind of geographic dimensions does the schema support, whether it's latitude, longitude, altitude, points, polygons, or place names, or all kinds of things. So we're looking at what allowances might be there. Then this thematic dimension, which is quite broad. It could be by variable, it could be by all different ways of thinking. So just this general thematic approach. So some kind of theme to the data set, and what fields might there be to describe that. And then another thing that comes up a lot. So I actually added this in, this came up on our, in our exercise with the Post-its, but we hadn't really talked about this too much before, but this notion of often data sets are bundled based on them all being data for a particular project or an expedition or an experiment. And so if that's the case, how could that get described within the metadata record? So those are basically sort of these dimensions, and then looking at sort of some other areas of that impacts granularity in collections is what aspects is there for collections? Like, can you associate a given data set to a collection? And if so, how? What kind of versioning metadata is there? Because this can constrain a lot of the ways we go about defining our data sets when we want to version them. And how do we maintain those relationships? And there's other kinds of relationships that we might want to include in our considerations here. So if one data set is derived from another, or a fusion of other data sets, how to represent that. And then getting into more like the granularity, how is size and volume of a data set encapsulated? And and if there's any kinds of formats as well that need to be delineated. So those are the ones that I pulled out of what we had done as a sort of a group exercise, and this could be missing some important ones. But if you're interested to work through this exercise with us, looking at the difference, like we need to start adding, I did one as a little exercise with DataCite as a starting point, but certainly we need to kind of go through a lot of the more common schemas and pull out what's happening there and start the comparisons later on after we've kind of done that first gathering of information. But that's where we are now, and we'll be meeting once a month and working together on this. So if you'd like to join, certainly join our subgroup, and we can definitely use more people to help fill this out. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Oops, wrong button. So I guess we're back to talking about the survey. Oops.
Yes, so thank you, Raina. Yeah, so let's go back to the survey. That is the link there, and we now have 10 responses. So thank you very, very much for everyone who took the time to fill it out and to make comments. Doing that is super valuable. So as some of you have noticed, there are still a couple of problem errors. And Raina, next slide, please. There are a couple of, Raina, can you please? Yeah, no, just one. Okay, thank you. There are a couple of things that were quite challenging in designing that. So what are even the goals? So one of the goals is that we want to know what the landscape is in terms of granularity and size. And this is why we are asking the repository owners or representatives about what kind of entities they have and what kind of granularity they had. And one of the things that occurred to us, and is also some interest to RE3 data, is what are the big repositories and what are the small repositories, and are there any differences? And so if you look at the metadata, you'll find science descriptions that are something like 13 data verses, or one, was it a billion? I think it's billion characters. So you can't really compare these two. So one of the questions that we were asking ourselves is, how can we have something like a size estimate that in some way at least gives us a realistic representation of what people, or if this is a big or a smallish repository. So there are a couple of ways to go about this. We could, go with the numbers of PIDs, but then of course you would have this small is the same problem as above. That these are not really comparable, also because of the heterogeneity of the entities that are registered in DataCite, and some of them are really small and some of them are rather big. We could go, try to estimate by bytes, now how much terabytes or gigabytes or whatever do they have, but that of course would bias very much in favor of video and image. And so one of the, I think, more or less crazy ideas was to try to get an estimate in terms of money. And that's why you had that ballpark question in there, which was really just, like a ballpark thing. And yeah, and I just really curious as to how people would answer it. And Raina, if you push the button, then we can see how people answered that. Right, yeah, okay, thank you. I would say that's a little vague. So I think usually people don't really know how that would work out and how much an entity would actually cost to produce. I think we could go two ways from here. Either, try to make that more, try to explain more what we mean with that euro idea or US dollar idea, but I'm not sure. So if any of you have any alternative ideas on how to just vaguely estimate size in a way that could be more, better suited, then please raise your hand and speak up here, because we'd be really interested in it. Or do you think that going with money is a good way to go about it? Are there any opinions here? Okay, so
sorry, I just, my random opinion is, I think it's very difficult, I guess, for people that might be doing the survey to come up with a number, like, because they might be just representing one part of the equation and only be able to like give their, the cost out, the work that they put into it, and maybe not from all the way from the collection to the publication of the data set. So I think maybe if it was I think that's pretty difficult.
Yeah, I realize that as well. Well, we have survey data. So for survey data, it went very well. So we just looked at it and was like, okay, we know that doing a survey costs at least so many euros. But I do realize that for other disciplines it might not be so easy. So and also maybe we should maybe have like categories, so less than €1, more than €100, or something like that. So it's a bit more clear that you don't have to give like a number. So Maggie, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think this is impossible to answer actually, because where do you draw the line of what is going to go into this cost summary? And also, if you are a repository manager, you may not at all be connected to the initiatives that are producing the data. So you have no idea how much that would cost. And also, I mean, if you, for instance, think of some physical science where you need an incredibly expensive instrument to make some kind of observation, like a telescope or something like that. So the first data set that you produce with that one, is that going to carry all the cost of the whole telescope? Because you don't know if it will break down tomorrow, so that you will be able to make a second observation with it, or what? So how do you sort of, I forget what the English word for this is, but how do you break down cost over time? If it's a data set that contains data from the last 150 years of polar expeditions, is that then covering all the costs that went into producing all those 150 years of polar data, or what?
Yeah, I see the point there, and I was just trying to. I mean, this is a pretest. I'm really just trying things out and see what happens. Yeah, I don't know. So we would probably brainstorm a little bit more and hope that we can get to a different estimate that does not involve the cost of the data, but maybe something else, something that's also approximates how, I mean, maybe we just ask how many people in the institutions deal with these sorts of things or whatever. So something like that, maybe. So yeah, this is really something that I think, I mean, it was a nice idea, I think, but I think maybe it doesn't work as well as I had hoped when we designed it. Okay, so Reina, next slide, please. Yeah, so the second issue, this is also something that I brought up in the group, I think last month or month before, is how do we even call these different granularity levels? So the scheme that we currently have in the survey is very, very simple and very abstract, and it doesn't really fit perfectly. And we can see that also in the results, because a lot of people have clicked multiple answers there. Yeah, so this is something that we absolutely do need to refine. I can see that, but I'm also not too unhappy with how that went down, because I think people were able to answer that question in some way, or maybe from the people who actually did fill it out. So how did you feel about that question? Was that something that you felt was difficult, or that you weren't sure on how to answer that? Can I maybe get a a quick opinion on that?
I can make comments, which I put in the last sentence. It focused on, what I read is it focused on the entity.
Katie,
oh,
we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, my microphone was misaligned. So it seems to focus on the entity that got the DOI, and I'm not sure if I missed the opportunity to describe levels of granularity that were in there, but weren't the formal entity that got the DOI. So that could help maybe.
Okay, yeah, so maybe we should clarify what exactly we're talking about. So the entity that got the DOI, and then the granularity of exactly that entity was what I would expect that people would answer. Yeah. Okay, Maggie, another.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that we shouldn't use DOI as a term as a generic persistent. No, I think Katie was maybe using it as more of a general term for a PID that is issued for a finalized data set or something like that, or a fully documented persistent identifier. There are many different persistent identifier schemes out there that are being used, and we need to be less detailed here, I think, in this survey to avoid confusion.
Yes, absolutely. So I very deliberately called it a PID in the survey, and yeah, because I know, I mean, we also work a lot with DOI, so it kind of, like you get into the mood of doing that, but that's of course not very representative of the reality that's out there, as we can also see. So if you go to the next slide. Here you can see the first 6 responses for the question, and also only for the first entity. And I am thinking I have to analyze a little bit more. I'm thinking that we should try to find clearer vocabulary, but that also 100% of the people that came all the way to this question go like, oh, it's a package of multiple files and so on and so forth. So maybe that's instructive already, and also we need to clarify with what are we even trying to find out. I think that's also something that we need to think about a little bit more. Okay, next slide. And Raina has a question.
Yeah, just also thinking, like, when you're talking about that question about what granularity level would you say the entity represent, it'd be nice too if maybe it's a separate question around like which dimensions are you using to define your boundaries of your entity, whether it's a data set or whatever it is, so that we start to get information about if repositories are using more temporal, like what's guiding their decision, if they have guidance at all, what is their guidance currently? That'd be helpful, some way to extract that.
Yeah, that was again one of the challenges in designing that, to really think about how can we do that, and also how can we do that in a way that it doesn't is so elaborate and no one is able to understand it. So I think that I'm quite happy with that the size is in a way that most people seem to be able to know what they're supposed to be doing. But yeah, I think that we need to think a bit more about how we what exactly we are asking there. Okay, and then there were also a lot of comments about at the very end of the survey, the challenges. And this is, of course, something that's just a stand-in for the challenges that eventually we will talk about when we go to the use cases and see how does that gel, and what kind of groupings can we identify, what kind of clusters can we identify with the. So these were just like the 6 things that were mentioned at some point, and so we just put it on there. Yeah, but again, here with the challenges, so we have discovery and citation to specific, citation to unspecific, reproducibility, duplication, how did you feel about it? Maybe I'm actually very much looking at Katie, do you think that's a viable way to feed the information from a use case group back into that question?
That was a rhetorical question, or did you want an answer?
Yeah, so how do you feel about that?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure I quite absorbed it.
Okay, so eventually we will want to ask there for something that is very similar to what you will presumably produce in the use case group, which is the classes of use cases. And then we will ask people like what classes does occur within your repository.
Yeah, so we could bring to that examples that we already have. That would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, maybe just switch to the next slide. Oh, okay. There's a large chat message here, and these are the answers to that. So there were 4 questions. One of them, how would you rate the homogeneity of the granularity within the entities your repository provides? Number 5 was complete homogeneity, so everything is exactly the same. And as I thought, nobody was actually having a perfect repository, which is kind of reassuring. Because sometimes I feel like, oh, we have such a mess, but it's nice to know that other people have a mess too. And then there's the challenges. So discovery was mentioned by 83%, and then citation to specific and was a topic as well. And duplication apparently does not seem to be that much of a problem. But those are actually all the options that we gave. So I think probably some people just clicked on everything. So this is something that occurs with them. Okay, next slide. And here, just for kickers, who chooses a granularity level for the entities in your repository? Again, we had a lot of answers like we can choose the repository freely, which is one answer that the one person gave, all the way to data providers can do whatever they want, and that is 2 answers. So we have great diversity here. So I think this is actually an interesting question. I would actually want to have like a follow-up question like, okay, if you have guidelines, can you please post a link or something like that? And the other one is that, would you like to have stricter rules? And again, most people would, yeah. They could be stricter. That seems to be almost, and just one person said that they have rules that are already too strict. And also one person said that that rules wouldn't really work in their environment, which is, I think, also a valid response. Maybe I just even add that to that. Okay, and that's it from my side. Yeah, not happy with current rules is also a very good answer to that one. I would definitely add that one. Yeah, because I mean, there are other levels of complaints and just too strict and not enforced enough. It's also a matter of I don't really like it. Okay. As we pointed out, it was a technical error not to make that that you could choose multiple answers for that, because that totally makes sense, and I apologize. And that leads us to the wrap up, and I think Katie wanted to do that, or
oh, you're already on a roll, so I didn't. You're welcome to. Okay, we just wanted to say I was keeping us on time.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for joining us for this plenary. We do have a homepage which we have recently worked on, so there's a lot of up-to-date information on there. If you are interested in joining the working group, you just go on that page and sign up through the normal channels. Also, if you have any questions, you can ask Arena, Katie, or myself. Just send us a direct email. And we also have a Slack space, which I think you can reach through the links section in the session notes. So if you're interested in having an insider perspective on what we are doing every day, then that's what you can do. We have a meeting schedule. The whole working group meets once a month, and we have currently decided to do that every third Thursday at 8 a.m. North America Pacific, which is in the afternoon in Europe. So sort of like around now. And we have the survey subgroup, which so far has met on demand, and we have the use case subgroup who also meets twice a month, and the constraint subgroup who also meet once a month. And that's it from our side. And we really would love for you to join us because we always need more people, and we're very active. There's lots of discussions, and as you can see, you can really do something and be part of something that moves forward. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, thank you as well. Have a nice day or evening, or actually, I was just, going to lead over to the final questions and comments and suggestions that someone might have. Please raise your hand now, or I will just wish all of you a pleasant evening day.
Yeah, I'm just checking in the chat. I'm not seeing any questions or.
Oh, there's some goodbyes.
Yeah,
which I appreciate, and thank yous.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
And thank you all.
Thank you all for participating. And I just looked through the notes for the breakout group, and it's really productive. So thank you again very much for that. And yeah, I see you around at the IDA, or maybe come around, join our working group.